James Thompson was not your typical homeowner. He had purchased a large lakeside property years ago, attracted by the tranquility, the fishing, and the freedom to enjoy water sports without interference. His lakefront cabin wasn't flashy, but it was comfortable, well-maintained, and surrounded by hundreds of acres of pristine land. For James, it was a sanctuary. The trouble started when the HOA president, a woman named Karen, decided she had the authority to dictate what could and could not be done on the lake. Karen had always been strict about rules and boundaries, but this time she went too far. She sent James an official notice. His boat was not allowed on the lake, citing vague HOA regulations about watercraft usage and safety. James laughed when he read the letter. "Not allowed?" he muttered. "This is my property. I own the lake as much as the land around it. No one is banning my boat." But Karen didn't care about legality or ownership. She had a vision of control and was determined to enforce it. The next weekend, James arrived at the lake to find a small group of HOA board members standing by the dock, taking measurements, snapping photos of his boat, and whispering among themselves. Karen waved at him, her tone sharp. "James, your boat cannot remain here. It violates HOA guidelines. You need to remove it immediately, or we'll take action." James stayed calm, though his blood boiled. "This is ridiculous," he said. "I have every right to use my boat here. You do not own this lake, and your so-called guidelines have no legal weight over my property." Karen scoffed. "We're just trying to maintain order. You can't be the only one doing whatever you want." "I don't need permission to enjoy what I legally own," James replied. He left the scene, knowing he needed a plan. Karen and the HOA were relentless, but James had always believed in responding strategically, not emotionally. Over the next few days, Karen escalated her attempts. She sent letters threatening fines, posted signs along the lakefront claiming certain areas were off-limits, and even tried to gather neighbors to pressure James into compliance. But every threat he received only confirmed one thing: Karen and the HOA had underestimated him. James decided to research the HOA's own rules and records. What he found was revealing. The HOA had a small fishing club that used the same lake for tournaments, events, and exclusive privileges. But here's the catch. Much of the land and water they claimed as theirs legally belonged to James, as per his property deeds. Every dock, every pier, and every restricted zone had been built on his land, often without permission. It was clear what needed to happen. If the HOA wanted to try and ban his boat, he could respond by targeting their prized activities, the fishing club. James didn't act out of spite, but he did intend to send a clear message. You don't overstep boundaries when you're dealing with someone who knows their rights and is willing to enforce them. The first step was contacting local authorities and municipal officials. James presented his documentation, highlighting every illegal structure, every dock built without his consent, and the fishing club's use of his property. He made it clear that any organized events on his land without authorization were not only unauthorized but actionable under the law. Soon, he issued official notices to the HOA and the fishing club. The letters were precise. Any use of his property for club events or tournaments without written permission would result in immediate legal action. The language left no room for interpretation. Karen, upon receiving the notice, was furious. She called an emergency board meeting, ranting about James overreacting and threatening to escalate the matter further. But the board had no legal leverage. James had done his homework, and the law was firmly on his side. The following weekend, the fishing club attempted to hold a tournament. Members arrived early, expecting to set up their usual docks and staging areas. But they were stopped at the water's edge by James and a small team of legal observers and local officers. The tournament was immediately canceled, and members were reminded that they had no legal right to hold events on the lake without his explicit consent. The humiliation was palpable. Club members who had once treated the lake as their private playground were now forced to confront the reality. They had been trespassing. Karen's authority evaporated in the face of hard evidence and decisive action. Word spread quickly. Neighbors and the media caught wind of the story. An HOA tried to ban a homeowner's boat, only to have their own club shut down legally and publicly. The embarrassment was complete. Karen's reputation within the community took a hit, and members of the board began questioning her judgment. James didn't stop there. He reinforced the lake boundaries with clear signage, legal notices, and regular patrols. Any attempt to bypass the rules would now result in immediate enforcement. He also offered alternatives for residents. They could enjoy the lake legally through rental permits or special events coordinated with him, but only under his terms. The message was clear. The lake was his, the property was his, and overstepping boundaries would carry consequences. Karen and the HOA had tried to assert control through intimidation, but they had underestimated James' knowledge, preparation, and resolve. By midweek, the HOA fishing club was effectively shut down. Karen tried negotiating with James, pleading for leniency and promising to behave in the future. James listened patiently but remained firm. "You don't get to decide the rules here," he said. "You wanted to challenge me? Now you've seen the consequences. Respect my property, or face legal action. It's that simple." The board members, who had initially supported Karen, began to distance themselves. Some publicly apologized for their missteps, acknowledging that James had acted within his rights. The lake was restored to its rightful order, and Karen's authority over it was effectively nullified. James's decisive action sent a clear warning to anyone else who might try to overstep boundaries. Over the next month, he monitored the lake closely, ensuring compliance and reinforcing his legal control. No further incidents occurred, and the HOA eventually disbanded its attempts to interfere with his property. Neighbors admired James's approach. He hadn't reacted with anger or rashness. He had used evidence, law, and strategy to protect his property and rights. Karen, on the other hand, became a cautionary tale. Arrogance, overreach, and attempts to intimidate a knowledgeable property owner can backfire spectacularly. By the end of the summer, the lake was peaceful again. James could enjoy his boat freely, organize private events, and fish without interference. The HOA's fishing club was no more, and the community had learned a vital lesson about respecting boundaries and legal ownership. James reflected on the ordeal with satisfaction. He hadn't sought revenge, but he had ensured accountability. The HOA's overreach had been corrected, and his property rights were stronger than ever. The lake, once a point of contention, had become a symbol of vigilance, preparation, and the importance of standing firm when facing unjust authority. In the end, Karen and her board learned that trying to impose rules on someone who knows and defends their rights is a mistake with consequences they couldn't ignore. James' calm, calculated approach had protected his property, reaffirmed his authority, and shut down their fishing club for good. The lake was his. The boat remained, and anyone who thought they could challenge him learned a powerful lesson. Respect property, follow the law, and never underestimate someone who knows their rights.